Hi, my name is Chris Yee, also known as Nerdchomp. Up until now, my YouTube channel is focused on the development of my main project, Nectar, a science fiction 3D puzzle platformer with knowledge-based progression. But about a month ago, something changed. I woke up one morning with a message sitting in my Discord inbox from Blackthornprod. If you don't know who they are, they do big collaboration videos with lots of different game developers on YouTube. Their bread and butter content is their Pass the Game challenge, where multiple devs work on the same game, one after the other, without communicating with each other. But recently, they've been doing these game dev competitions where 6 developers compete for a money prize. The message in my inbox was an invitation to compete in their next competition. And this was a complete shock to me. Even though I currently have more than 6,000 subscribers, I still struggle with pretty severe imposter syndrome. I've been doing this still for less than 2 years, and I don't consider myself a real game developer. I've also been watching their channel for a while, and I was a big fan, so it baffled me that they would even consider inviting me. But the opportunity was way too good to pass up, so I very quickly said yes. So what are the rules of the competition? Me and 5 other developers would compete for a $3,000 prize. The other competitors were Lazy T, Lazy Martinez, Cowsons, Skyline, and Athena Creates. There would be 3 rounds, and each round would last 1 week. After each round, the judges would play the games, converse, and 2 of the developers would be eliminated. Now, it's impossible to talk about my experience in the competition without major spoilers, so if you want to watch the competition first, I have a link to that in the description. You can pause this video, watch that first, and then come back for a more in-depth look at my perspective of the competition. But you've been warned, spoilers for the competition start now. So going into round 1, I was extremely nervous. Like I said, I have confidence issues, and after checking out the other competitors, I knew I was way out of my league. Nectar is the only project I've worked on, and that project has been going very slow. I've been taking my time to learn Unreal Engine, and adding a simple feature to my game, like a new mechanic or a plant type, has taken me as long as a month. I've never done any game jams or smaller projects, so I was not at all confident that I would be able to create something of quality in such a short amount of time. My goal is simply not to be eliminated in round 1, and if I were to make it to round 2, I would consider that a success. Now, each Blackthornprod competition has a theme, and that theme is revealed on day 1 of the challenge. The reveal of that theme happens at 9 AM Central European Time on a Monday morning. I live in Eastern Standard Time, so for me that reveal was at 3 AM. And I spent the entire night lying in bed, not being able to sleep, running through all the possible themes in my head, and at 3 AM I heard my phone buzz. I reached for it quietly, trying not to wake my fiance, and I saw the theme, Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. I had no idea what to do with that. It's like my mind just shut off and stopped working. I stayed up the rest of the night, trying to come up with ideas, and I essentially got no sleep that night. And then morning came, and it was time to get to work at my day job. That's right, when I'm not making games or YouTube videos, I'm at the job that pays the bills. I'm a bridge and tunnel inspector with a degree in civil engineering, and since it was a weekday, it meant I couldn't work on the game. Instead, I was stuck writing reports. But while I wrote reports, I was able to brainstorm ideas. I had a couple of ideas that I sort of liked. Metamorphosis is basically transformation, so one idea involved werewolf transformations. I had another idea involving shape-shifting into different shapes, like circles, squares, triangles, to solve platforming puzzles. These ideas were sort of interesting, but none of them really clicked with me. And then I was talking with a friend, and he mentioned one of his game ideas. It was a Metroidvania where you lose abilities instead of gaining them as you progress. And this sparked an idea in my head. What if you have a range of abilities, and they start out weak, but you can choose to cocoon an ability, which means you deactivate it for a level, and if you're able to complete that level without the ability, it transforms and becomes stronger. A simple example would be your jump. So you start out with a weak jump, you can cocoon your jump, which means that you can no longer jump during that level, and if you successfully beat the level without your jump, then your jump height increases. Now that exact example didn't quite make it into the final version of the game, but it's a good example for explaining the concept. And to stick with the Metamorphosis theme, I decided to tie each of these abilities to bugs. So you cocoon a bug, and the ability tied to that bug is disabled and eventually upgraded. So once the workday was over, I promptly got to work on the game. We were allowed to use any assets or tools that we already had. I don't have very many assets saved up. I do have a character controller and a camera system that I've made for my main project, which are both better than the default Unreal character controller and camera, so I used those. And then I needed a character design, so my fiance sketched up a few different concepts. I liked this little creature, so I modeled it in Blender, I rigged it, made some run and jump animations, and got it into the engine. Next, I had to build the core system for disabling and upgrading abilities. I created a default bug blueprint that I would eventually be able to copy and use as a template for other bugs. I got the system up and running fairly easily. For the next few days, I created 4 bug abilities. So I had a grasshopper for jumping, a spider for web zipping to ledges, a tiger beetle for run speed, and an ant for sticking to walls. The intention of the wall sticking was to eventually upgrade it to wall climbing, but I didn't actually have time to finish that, so it just stayed as wall sticking. There was something much more important that I had to do instead of finishing that, because the end of week 1 was coming up, and I still didn't have a game yet. All I had was a character that could run, jump, web zip, move around, but there were no levels, there was nothing to do. And I knew that I had to have at least something for the judges to play. So instead of finishing the abilities, I shifted my focus towards creating a tool that could procedurally build levels. Now that sounds complicated for a 3D platformer, but my version of it was basically the simplest version you could have. All I do is place cube-shaped tiles and place them at varying heights. In the early levels, the height variation is small, so you're able to jump the ledges easier, but as you get further into the game, the variation increases and the difficulty increases. There's also a chance that a tile won't spawn, which creates a gap in the level that the player has to traverse. It's very basic, but it serves its purpose as a platforming challenge to showcase the bug abilities. The player's goal is simple: they must reach the end of the level before the timer runs out. And the bug abilities can help you jump over ledges, climb walls, and cross large gaps. As week 1 ended, I worked right up to the submission deadline, I hit submit, and my game was now in the hands of the judges, which was terrifying, but now it was time for people to get eliminated. It turns out one of the competitors, Skyline, caught a nasty virus during the challenge and he actually wasn't able to submit a game in time, so he was disqualified, and that actually meant that only one person would be eliminated. And after playing the other submissions, I was sure that one person would be me. So the judging call came around, we all got on a call together, and they slowly revealed one by one who was moving on to the next round, and
the second semifinalist to pass into... the second semifinalist to pass into the next round will be... Nerdjob!
Awesome.
Congrats.
I made it to round 2 and I was thrilled. I was also mortified because the main feedback for my game was that the core mechanic didn't work. Apparently, the game was riddled with persistence bugs, and the abilities that you cocooned and upgraded would randomly stay disabled sometimes. So basically, it was just unplayable. The reason I made it to round 2 is because they really liked the concept, and they saw potential in the idea. But I would really have to step it up in round 2 if I wanted to stand a chance. So the first thing I did was focus on fixing all of the persistence bugs and getting everything to work properly. And that took a couple days because I had to learn about game instances, something that I had never dealt with before. Again, I'm not really a game dev, I'm kind of just learning all of this as I go. It's probably something I should have known ahead of time, but now I do. So once that was fixed, it was time to make some changes to the formula. My round 1 build was okay for showcasing the basic concept, but it wouldn't work for the actual game I wanted to make. My game had 4 predefined slots with bugs already assigned to them, but I intended on adding a lot more bugs, so this predefined slot thing needed to change. I also found the control scheme to be confusing and hard to remember, so I just wanted to simplify the controls and allow for more bug and ability variation. I reduced the number of bug slots from 4 to 3, reserving 1 for a passive ability and the other 2 for active abilities that require a button press. To simplify the controls, I mapped the 2 active slots to a left click and right click, and instead of starting with predetermined bugs in your slots, the player starts with nothing and you have to rummage for bugs. The bugs you find through rummaging are random, so you either have to work with whichever bugs you find, or decide if you can survive another level or 2 without any new bugs. The action of rummaging for bugs needed to have a cost, which meant I needed to add some sort of currency, and since I already had a timer for my levels, and I wanted to encourage the player to move as fast as they could, I decided to take the extra time from your timer at the end of a level and bank it as the game's currency, and I called this currency spare time. I also added a narrative about a blizzard following the character, and to escape the blizzard, you need to reach the Imago stage of metamorphosis, but to complete the metamorphosis uninterrupted, you would need to accumulate 10 minutes of spare time. This creates a balance for the player to manage. They ultimately need to save their spare time, but they also need to spend their spare time rummaging for bugs so that they can survive the next level. To add a little more atmosphere, I used the Ultra Dynamic Weather plugin to add snow effects, and I grabbed some royalty-free music from Storyblocks and found some somber sounding cello music just to add to the mood. In addition to restructuring the game, I also added a few more bug abilities. I changed the web zip from the spider to the silkworm because I wanted to make the spider ability more of a tightrope mechanic, which I pulled from my main project. I also changed the way the ant works, getting rid of the wall stick mechanic and just making it a wall climb instead. And with that wall climb you have increasing stamina as you upgrade. I added a dragonfly which grants you wing flaps, which essentially function as additional jumps in the air. And then the round 2 twist that Blackthornprod threw at me was to add a mechanic from Lazy Martinez's game into mine. Now his game was about tentacle abilities and killing people and all that stuff. Really didn't fit my game, but his game did have a dash, so I was able to add the springtail to my game, which is a bug that gives you a dash ability. With these changes, I was pretty happy, and as I worked towards the round 2 deadline, I was gaining confidence in my little game. So I started to record some video footage for the devlog portion of my submission, and that is when disaster hit. I found bug after bug after bug, and they were game-breaking bugs, like disabling your jump for no reason. The deadline was at 3 AM Eastern Standard Time, and I had about 2 more hours to fix a whole bunch of different bugs that I previously didn't even know existed. Considering how buggy my game was in round 1, and that was my main criticism of round 1, I knew that I couldn't allow this many bugs to be in my submission for round 2. So I hunkered down and went into a hyper-focused mode. I swiped through my blueprints trying to track down the origin of each bug, eliminating them one by one, and after an extended panic attack and lots of work, I squashed what I thought were all of the bugs. Turns out it wasn't all the bugs. One of the judges still encountered one game-breaking bug that disabled his jump after mounting onto a spider web, but luckily for me,
second finalist of the Blackthornprod Game Dev competition is Nerd Chomp with Imago.
It was hard to believe that this was really happening. Again, I went into this challenge believing I was not really a game developer, so making it to the final round was basically an impossibility for me. Yet here I was, going up against Lazy T. He was the one I was most worried about from the beginning. His game looked incredibly polished, and his overall style was very strong. He was also just really good at making engaging devlogs. After 2 weeks of overworking myself, I was feeling burnt out. I had been staying up till 5 AM and running on 4 hours of sleep every day, and the plan was to keep that up for round 3. The judges had 2 main criticisms for my round 2 build. The first were my visuals. Even though I did make visual upgrades, they still thought it looked a little too prototypey. And the second criticism was that there was really no reason to rummage for new bugs once you had invested in your current bugs. So you're basically discouraged from using different abilities and switching your build. To address the visual aspect, I turned to Quixel Megascans. I have not been game deving long enough to build my own library of assets, and making my own assets from scratch in 1 week was just not possible for this challenge. But that was the big advantage that I had for using Unreal Engine. I had a gigantic library of Quixel Megascan assets ready to use. So to start off, I got rid of the border around my level so I could showcase a mountainous backdrop. So I placed a few mountains and placed some fog cards in front of them. I also added some volumetric fog to add more atmosphere. I swapped out the abstract start and end points of the level, and I decided to make them campfires instead. This fit with the themes and the narrative of the game much better. And then for the level tiles, I experimented with non-square tiles, but it resulted in overlapping platforms and it just looked horrible. But I did find a stone floor mesh that was still square, and it actually looked quite nice, so I used that. I also found a pack of rock meshes, and I randomly scattered a bunch of rocks throughout the level to give it a little more visual variation. And with these changes, I was very happy with the new look. The UI was still rough, but I am very new to UI design, and I was scared of completely breaking everything if I modified anything at all. Turns out I had set up all my UI incorrectly, and everything was on the verge of falling apart at any moment, so I didn't dare touch it. UI is something I'll need to learn about in the future, and a great place to do that is with the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online community for all creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across not just game development, but also film, illustration, graphic design, photography, music, marketing, etc. Whether you're picking up a new hobby from scratch, or you're attempting to sharpen your existing skills, Skillshare has classes for beginners and experts alike. Skillshare has a learn by doing approach, which I have always believed is the best way to learn. Members can create and share projects after completing a class to get feedback from the community to improve their skills. One class in particular that caught my eye is this one about character UI creation in Unreal Engine, which is a comprehensive look into the creation of widgets and menus. Click on the link in the description to join Skillshare and gain access to thousands of classes to boost your creative ambitions. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. So with my visuals upgraded, the next thing I needed to address was the gameplay concerns. To begin with, I added a little auto jump to get over ledges, since I noticed some judges were struggling to clear ledges sometimes. But the bigger concern was the systemic issue with my rummage bug mechanic. I needed a way to encourage the player to use different bugs. A few people suggested adding an inventory where you could store bugs and save them for later. This was an interesting idea, but I decided to go with a different option. I added a lifespan mechanic, so each bug has its own lifespan. At the end of each level, their lifespan decreases by 1, and if their lifespan runs out, that bug dies and you lose its ability. This forces the player to constantly switch out their bugs, and it also forces them into builds that they wouldn't normally use. But this change also makes cocooning bugs far less valuable, and I wanted to preserve the idea that you can invest in your bugs and make them stronger. So I added these herbs, which sometimes pop up when you rummage for bugs, and these herbs extend the lifespan of your bugs. There's a common herb that extends the lifespan by 1, there's an uncommon herb that extends it by 3, and there's a rare herb that's very hard to find, but if you do find it, you can feed one of your bugs and nullify the lifespan mechanic, making them live forever. Now I noticed through playtests that the web-based bugs were a bit overpowered. You could use the silkworm to zip through the entire level most of the time, so I reduced the number of webs you get per level, and I also added the possibility of iced platforms appearing. Both webs and wall climbing don't work with iced platforms. This forces the player to have a backup plan and not only rely on the silkworm. To add even more danger to the levels and another layer of variety, I added these bear traps that are scattered throughout the level. If you step on them, they send you back to the beginning of the level. I also lowered the amount of spare time you need to save up to win. I lowered it from 10 minutes to 8 minutes because 10 minutes was actually quite difficult to reach. And in addition to all of that, I added one more passive bug because I felt like I didn't have enough passive bugs. I added the woolly aphid, which is a fairly obscure bug, but they have a cotton-like covering and they are known to float in the wind. So in the game, the woolly aphid makes you really floaty, which can pair very well with the dragonfly or the springtail. And then finally we had the round 3 twist. Lazy T and I exchanged one-word themes that the other would have to incorporate into their game somehow.
So, your theme is flight.
The word Lazy T gave to me was flight, and admittedly, this was a very generous word for him to give me. I could easily just add another flying bug and call it a day, but I felt like I had phoned it in with the twist in round 2, and I wanted to get a little more creative with it. So for flight, I added a fight or flight mechanic. These random predator events would occur, and these predators want to eat your bugs. The player has the choice to either stand their ground and defend their bug, which costs some of your spare time and success isn't guaranteed, or you can flee the predator and let your bug die. You don't use any spare time, but you have to go directly into the next level without rummaging or cocooning anything. These events add a little fold into the mix, and it can throw a wrench into the player's plans. And those were all the changes I made for round 3. I submitted my final build and patiently waited for the judges. At this point, I was extremely sleep deprived, having been running on only 4 hours of sleep every day for almost 3 weeks straight. But regardless of whether I won or lost, I was very happy with the game I created, and I was ready to get some rest. When the judges were ready, they revealed that it was a very close race. There were 5 judges, and the final count of votes was 3-2. Now that call was both nerve-wracking and exciting. I knew that Lazy T's game was good, but I also had gained a lot of confidence in my own game. In my eyes, the vote could go either way, and then the winner was revealed.
Anyway, without further ado, we're gonna, one by one, each judge is gonna say who he voted for, and who basically won $3,000 in the 4th Blackthornprod Game Dev competition.
These choices are of course never easy, but for me, at least in the final round, the winner personally was clear, and for me it is Nerd Chomp.
So the game that I'm voting for to win this competition is Lazy T.
Alright, so my vote goes towards Imago, so Nerd Chomp's game.
Okay, my 4th vote. I'm gonna make it a tie. It's Lazy T.
So, in the end, my vote goes to Nerd Chomp.
I have no idea how I won, but I did. My goal going into this challenge was to make it past round 1 and to not embarrass myself in front of everyone. I've never considered myself a real game dev, so the fact that a board of judges thought my game was good enough to win this competition meant the world to me. Sure, the money was nice too, but being accepted by my peers as a game developer means so much more to me. So what is the future of my game, Imago? I plan on continuing its development. There are a lot of issues I'm already aware of. The difficulty is way too hard, the fight or flight mechanic is too punishing, and the player is too much at the mercy of luck right now. I plan on restructuring some things so that I can ultimately expand on the core concept, and I want to add a lot more content. Hopefully I can add more environments with their own unique environmental mechanics to bring more variety and give the player a little break from the harsh Blizzard setting. I've already been playing around with an ocean level where the platforms move with the waves of the ocean. I plan on documenting the development of Imago on this channel, so if you want to follow the progress of this game, subscribe to this channel to see more in the future. Thanks.